Happy Friday, David. Welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Jason.
It's a nice day. It's a little rainy here in New York, but you know, spring has begun. We've got a very interesting image for today. Do you want to talk about the image a bit and explain why we've chosen some of these things today?
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting if it's raining in New York, because apparently you've got Mr. Zweigart in your collage skulking in a tunnel. And skulking seems to be a great word for this character. So your collage, just very quickly, you've got some intriguing characters. You've got David G. Zweigart in his janitorial capacity, apparently sweeping up evidence from crime scenes that might have strayed from those people who have custody or should have custody.
Spoliating, perhaps. He's very fond of spoliating.
Yes, and cracking or breaking or hacking into the chain of custody or such things. Then you have in the central tunnel the schematic of the Federal Bridge. And that's intriguing because there are two yellow blobs down at about 4 or 5 o'clock on the Federal Bridge. Rather remarkable, because they crept in some significant number of years after 9/11, when the UK MOD was shown elsewhere. But in addition, with this recent schematic, and I don't know exactly when it came out, maybe people can track that, they've got a yellow blobbed UK MOD and a Netherlands or Dutch MOD, which I find very interesting, because the woman who is an unintercepted, unindicted terrorist leader by the name of Bernardine Dawn has got a shared faculty arrangement with, and I can't pronounce it, a university in the Netherlands, in Holland. Right?
Wow.
And I would allege that this woman never stopped being the leader of the Weather Underground Organization, because the Weather Underground Organization was never dismantled. It just went into a different level of camouflage that I believe can best be described by the evil teachers community.
David, may I pause you there for a moment, because I think this is something that we cannot overstate. The fact that both the University of Illinois in Chicago and Northwestern University, which I believe is also either in or very close to Chicago, have employed these two individuals, I think is reason enough to be questioning almost anything happening at these universities. Even though they've avoided incarceration, I need to brush up on my information about exactly what went on with the Weather Underground. But you know, even though they were able to avoid incarceration for bombings and basically terrorist activities, why would someone hire them?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I got a possible answer for you. Because they're scared to death of these people, because they're psychopaths, sociopaths, and unindicted killers. Right now, I think today's show, we actually have a generic analytical tool, I think, that can apply to a lot of these attacks, bombings, and shootings, and so on, going back to the Unabomber. Because listeners may not know, the first two targets of the Unabomber, which is allegedly Ted Kaczynski, who's stored in a nice cell in ADX Florence, courtesy of Field McConnell's sister, Christine Marcy. The first two targets for Ted Kaczynski, or the real Unabomber, because I don't think Ted Kaczynski was the principal, was Northwestern University. Yeah. And it got the name Unabomber because basically the FBI decided the two communities of targets, if that's the right word, were airlines and universities. Now, wouldn't that be interesting if Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers, having gone undercover through the 70s, emerge, I think, in the 1980s with a clean bill of health, although I think Bernardine Dawn might have spent a year in custody, in jail. Wouldn't it be interesting if those two, who are really into manifestos, these people who have no role models in their life and have limited prospects of employment and success, they do love to produce a manifesto, right? So the FLQ in Quebec produced a manifesto. I believe this guy Tarrant has a manifesto, the Unabomber has a manifesto, and I believe Bernardine Dawn has a manifesto. And it's really what they would like to do with society without society's knowledge or consent. So Bernardine Dawn...
Before you continue, David, would you agree that this really bizarre ransom note that we speak about so frequently has certain characteristics of a manifesto of its own?
Yes, it does. And also it's written by a very educated person, although the quality of education of people like Bernardine Dawn, either received or given, I think should be questioned. Not that I'm claiming an engineer who graduated as a BA, Mr. Kevin, what's his name? Who's that big tattooed blob that is criticizing
moron? I forgot his name.
Kevin
Moron? Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know his
something
name.
Like that. Yeah. Anyway, he says, David Hawkins, how can he call himself a BA when he's an engineer? Shouldn't he be a B-Eng, right? And of course, Cambridge offers BAs for everything, you know, whether you're a mathematician or whatever. But that's by the by. But the writing, the quality of the writing and the vocabulary and the language, I would say this would be typical of an educated member, not necessarily, but of faculty. I mean, it could be Lynn Cheney, but, you know, they're using the word like attaché for briefcase and the general language. And it says, I think, we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. So these people think they're very smart, right?
Yeah.
And they're familiar, let's assume they're saying what they mean, they're familiar with law enforcement countermeasures. So they might be familiar with the activities of Donald Sack-Lieben, right, who's the bomb expert for the FBI, or was, and he went around studying the Unabomber's activity. I believe he was in Ted Kaczynski's hut, and he found the bomb-making recipes and notes, presumably for the Unabomber manifesto. But what happens, Jason, if he planted that information or that evidence? Right? Or he goes to the Al Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, or he visits the East African embassies, where a lot of Americans get killed, and local people, right? And how do we know that he's not planting the evidence? Because he's also arrested for dealing in child pornography.
So this is the guy you've sent me this New York Times article about. This is very interesting, David, because this is something from 2013 that maybe people don't recall right now. So let's talk about this guy. Who is this guy?
Well, he's a bomb investigator, a bomb technician, and he evidently he was under investigation in a separate child pornography case, and he's also pled guilty to leaking classified information to the Associated Press about a foiled bomb plot in Yemen.
Wow.
Now, he had years of experience with the FBI, but again, what he seems to me would be a wonderful target for someone like Bernardine Dawn. And remember, she specializes, or she gives a seminar in torture paradigms and practice. She's an unindicted psychopath, sociopath, and killer. They should be behind bars, quite possibly they're on death row, but they're now esteemed members of the academic community who might have identified, and remember, we're talking about in this today's interview about the possibility of an attack on the Federal Bridge. Well, sitting on the Federal Bridge, of course, is Lockheed Martin, right? And little John Benet Ramsey's father, John Bennett Ramsey, was the chief executive officer of Access Graphics, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, which was referred to indirectly through the ransom letter because it talks of $118,000
right
as the ransom for the little girl, when that was the bonus paid by Lockheed Martin's directors to John Bennett Ramsey for his performance, I believe, in installing encrypted systems in the Pentagon renovation project.
It's also worth mentioning, David, that Bernardine Dawn tried to bomb the Pentagon, right? She set off a bomb in the bathroom of the Pentagon. So, I mean...
Well, it was the women's bathroom, actually, which I think shows a real sexist approach for this bitch, right? Because why didn't she bomb the men's bathroom?
But why wasn't she, I mean, I don't understand why she's not in jail, A. And even if she's not, we need to look into why she's not in jail. But like, you know, there's cases, of course, where technicalities related to evidence or whatever, someone who should be in jail maybe is not. But why would a respected university then hire that person? And doesn't it allow us to question virtually anything that that person is doing at the university and be suspicious of what they're doing? As you said, these are Marxist subversives who are now educating the youth of America, and there are some people on the internet who want to criticize you and I for asking valid questions about this. They don't seem to be criticizing anyone else. They're very, very focused on you and I. They're very focused on discouraging people from participating in our weekly subscriber-only shows on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We also simulcast the show on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But I do want everyone to be aware that after this broadcast at 2 p.m. Eastern, people can go to David's Patreon page at patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth to see the follow-up where we get into even more detail. But don't you find it strange, David, that these guys want to discourage everyone from asking these questions and hearing the responses, or try to write letters preemptively to some of the organizations we speak of and totally mischaracterize what we say to discourage us from continuing?
Well, no, because once you've perfected this split tunnel technology and protected it with a patent, you can create three kinds of communities that each have a role in concealing what I believe Mr. Swigart calls a solicitation to murder network, or a murder for hire network. And what's intriguing is the most logical place that I can find where you might develop that split tunnel technology is with Starnet Communications at 425 Carroll Street, up to the time of the raid by 100 law enforcement people. And remember that phrase in the ransom note, with 2 SWAT teams from south of the border, the United States, that I believe entered Canada without permission or without the knowledge and consent of the Canadian government. And it was a very, very significant raid because they took away all the evidence of apparently an international trade in child and hardcore pornography and online gaming in up to 60 countries.
Yeah. And of course, it's not you and I. It's not you and I who are so fixated on this child pornography, but it just keeps coming up when we start investigating these, you know, publicly available news articles and things about agents of the FBI who have been investigating some of this stuff. It's just very interesting.
Oh, totally, totally. And going back to the 3 networks that are actually being entrained in this split tunnel technology, we have obviously the Federal Bridge, and then we have the social engineering promoted and patronized and possibly perfected by the ethical hacker, David G. Swigart. And then we have the network on which, let's say, the kind of snuff films apparently captured by Mr. Tarrant in the New Zealand mosques, that went out on apparently very high-speed links that would be typical of Northwestern University's IT partnerships, which links to the evil Batcave at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So this couple of sociopaths and unindicted murderers, in my opinion, they can sue me if they like, I doubt if they will. You've got Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers. Bernardine Dawn was on faculty at the University of Northwestern University. She's presumably retired, but she would be a beneficiary of the Teachers Insurance Annuity Association, the world's largest private pension fund, which is a shareholder of Serco, one of whose representatives presumably met on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11 in the attack on the United States of America that resulted in 3,000 deaths, which I would have thought would exactly suit the agenda and the manifesto mentality of Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers. As far as Bill Ayers is concerned, he was on faculty at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and presumably as a beneficiary of the same pension fund as his wife. I won't say good wife. This is not a good wife. This is a... Anyway, I won't digress. But the point is, the University of Illinois, Chicago hosts the Electronic Visualization Laboratory, the Bright Advanced Technology, and the CAVE Automated Virtual Environment, which would be a wonderful place to sit and watch Mr. Tarrant spraying bullets around the mosque in New Zealand, if you were into that kind of shit. Sorry.
Well, and of course, the question is raised simply because this is a group that possesses some unique technology and most uniquely employs former or possibly current terrorists.
Well, current terrorists. I mean, there's no doubt about it. These guys are current terrorists. They're unindicted criminals. But just to the left of Bernardine's shoulders, you have that little cluster of entities on the Federal Bridge. I mean, her left shoulder, sorry. Yep. So you have this cluster of very interesting elements in the state of Illinois, the Department of Justice, and the Veterans Affairs. And the topic today is, could these split tunnels and broken chains support an evil teacher's attack on the Federal Bridge? Now, if you look at the Federal Bridge, the players, if you will, on the Federal Bridge, that is an immensely powerful organization and network, right? You have the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense. A lot of people actually think the British Empire is finished. Personally, I don't think it's ever been stronger, because the Americans, who fancy themselves perhaps as the greatest power in the world, are not aware that the British and the British company like Serco have totally penetrated all the significant departments in the United States, including the National Visa Center, which is run by Serco, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is run by Serco, FAA Contract Towers, about 68 are run by Serco, and the United States Defense Ammunition Center, which is run by Serco. Like, what else are you going to hand over to the British company Serco, which is a proxy for the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense?
You know, David, so something else occurred to me, actually, that I don't know why this took so long, but it involves someone else who would be connected to Veterans Affairs and another person who I think would fit the group of evil teachers, or may fit the group of evil teachers, and another guy who is pretty close to several hackers. I'm speaking about military veteran Robert David Steele, virus security software developer John McAfee, and current teacher Cynthia McKinney, who received thousands of dollars of campaign contributions from convicted jihadi terrorists on September 11th, 2001. Now, Robert David Steele has been accused in a federal civil lawsuit of committing charity fraud, and I've presented evidence that he has appears to have illegally conducted a fundraising campaign in the state of New York without being properly registered with the New York State Attorney General and the New York State Bureau of Charities. Cynthia McKinney was complicit in that charity, and if it is in fact found by the court to be a fraud, it's possible that she may have to face charges in that matter, but she's a teacher in Bangladesh. I wonder if there's any connection to the IT partnership. And of course, John McAfee is famous for his antivirus company. George Webb Swigert used to work for McAfee, the brother of David Swigert. George Webb Swigert has shared many emails with Robert David Steele. He had lunch with Robert David Steele the day before George delivered information to me about a possible dirty bomb event in the port of Charleston. So these are three individuals who might be related to some of these activities. There are a lot of connections to people that we know.
Yeah, I think we're making some wonderful connections. I hope, I'm sure our sponsors do support us. But what I'm intrigued by, and this is a bit of an appeal, I think for us to have serious impact, I think we're having good impact on the people who are thoughtful about this, but I'd love to see some level of viral explosion of growth of the two Patreon sites. And it's not just about money. It's about, we're up against exposing an organization. If I could quickly describe the shareholders of Serco that met on the 47th floor of the North Tower on 911. There are 10 global custodians with, I would say today, about $150 trillion of assets under management. That's a lot of hooch. And then there's 3 governments, including the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, well, United Kingdom, of course, which has its Ministry of Defense as one of the key players, possibly a route authority, on the Federal Bridge. It has the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and it had Singapore, which is a big player in these Northwestern University IT partnerships with very high bandwidth links with the United States. Then you have the state of California, and then you have these 2 big teachers' pension funds, TIAA, which is the world's largest private pension fund with over $1 trillion of assets under management, including very, very significant shareholdings managed, for pension funds, etc., in Boeing, which, as you know, is now the target of an FBI investigation because of its software modification, etc. And I'm saying through the show, Boeing is a target for these people. Remember, the Unabomber was into the business of blowing up people at university and in airlines, right? If we start looking down that chain of custody of evidence, I think as we go down back that chain, past Donald Sachtleben, who was either making, distributing, or manufacturing child pornography, on, quite possibly, the networks developed for Starnet Communications at 425 Carroll Street in Vancouver, quite possibly carrying or having been checked out for terms of vulnerability to a police inspection by someone like David Swigart. Like, why wouldn't Starnet Communications backers in 1996 hire a Dave Swigart and tell him, look, we're really troubled because we want to trade in child pornography and hardcore pornography of women being killed out at the pig farm and do some online gaming, which is betting on death. And we're really worried that the Vancouver police or the RCMP might hack into our network. Mr. Swigart, would you come along, find out all our vulnerabilities and let us know, and we can stop the Vancouver police or the RCMP coming into the network and shutting us down. Right?
I do believe he's extolled some relationship or contact with the RCMP in the course of threatening you with legal action, so perhaps he is in communication with the Canadian authorities.
Well, now, and then you've got to explain to yourself, how come they can deploy 100 law enforcement officers to raid Starnet Communications on the 20th of August 1999 and take away all of the evidence, let's say, hypothetically, of a split tunnel criminal organization?
Well, I think an even better question, David, is, was Donald Sachtleben part of the team that raided 425 Carroll Street and maybe got in there? You know, he's an FBI agent, right, at that time. Do we know who was involved in that raid?
There wasn't anyone FBI, at least there was no one declared, but there was a SWAT team from the IRS and Immigration Customs Enforcement. And I believe the Immigration Customs Enforcement SWAT team would have been sent by Field McConnell's Conair catalog sister, Christine Marcy. And I call her the Conair catalog sister because I think she has a catalog of 3 very important databases. One is the database for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which she created with Eric Holder in 1984. Second, the kind of prisoners and their specialities and their guards for the United States Department of Justice prisoner and alien transportation system, which would allow you to take pedophiles and pimps and all-round scumbags like Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers to a crime scene of their choosing to act as, let's say, on-scene commanders of the Murrah Building bomb, right? or the 911 attack. So one of the things that I would like to know is, what was Bill Ayers and what were Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn doing on the morning of 911? Well, Bill Ayers had just penned a little missive for the New York Times. I think they call it the New York Slimes, don't they? I think Karl Marx was a correspondent for the New York Times way back in the 1850s. And he was always begging them for a bit more money, and they didn't give him enough, so he wrote the Communist Manifesto, right? So, I mean, what a clown. Anyway, so Bill Ayers writes this letter or gets it published or some article in the New York Times on September the 11th, 2001, yes, saying, well, I wish we had done more. Well, what more remains to be done on 911? Well, I guess attack the Pentagon, try and knock down the United States Capitol building, designed incidentally by the first superintendent of the patent office, Dr. William Thornton, who would grant a patent provided the patentee would sign him up as a co-patenter. Right? So there
David,
it is. There's Bill Ayers. I mean, the guy is a sociopath and a killer.
Has the New York Times ever spoken about this, having an article on September 11th in their newspaper from a known terrorist saying, I don't regret setting bombs? I mean, here we are, September 11th, 2001, maybe the most significant event in modern human history in terms of its impact on geopolitics in each of our lives. And this article opens with, I don't regret setting bombs. Why wouldn't they pull this? It must have already been set to publish on September 11th. It's quite odd.
Well, I think it comes back to what you've got. Serco is a RICO. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Serco is a racketeering influence and corrupt organization that has its networks and its fingers in every significant government department in the United States. And this is a British company. I mean, why would you outsource the operations of the United States Defense Ammunition Center to Serco, right? Because what that means is Serco, as a third-party logistics provider, would be able to track every bullet or every munition, whether they were precision mortar shells being rained down on the CIA annex in Benghazi or whatever. So Serco is capable, as a third-party logistics provider, of tracking everyone of significance in a major terrorist attack and potentially making sure that the witnesses don't reveal what really happened at the crime scene, because Serco runs a demon pedophile face recognition service around the world.
I haven't seen any references to that demon face recognition outside of Able Danger. How do we know about that demon face recognition?
Google Serco demon pedophiles, right? And you'll find that Serco has helped the British police authorities nail down a number of pedophile groups through a face recognition package which it developed with parties unknown. And remember, Serco runs a prisoner escort service. It also runs one jail, I think, in New Zealand and 2 or 3 in Australia. What the hell are the New Zealand authorities and the Australian authorities doing, letting Serco run a jail system, which is a wonderful recruiting ground for the kind of people who need to come together in a synchronized mob, if you will, to shoot up that mosque in New Zealand? So
a lot of people want to hear your input on that. I'm not finding anything for Serco demon pedophile other than Able Danger posts and Steam It posts and things like that. So we'll look for that some more later. I know they do use face recognition for all kinds of things. And also, as you've said, let me try DuckDuckGo, because a lot of times, just because something is removed doesn't mean it was never there.
Let's check. Well, pedophile, demon.
I mean, there's blog posts and things.
Yeah. So going back to the possibility that to put together a vulnerability test for StarNet Communications. Remember, StarNet Communications was doing something totally depraved. It was transacting, making, distributing, and selling on a pay-per-view basis child and hardcore pornography, which I believe, I've yet to be proven, included the killing of the First Nations women out at the pig farm in front of an audience on a Friday night rave of up to 1,700 people, where those bodies that were sufficiently complete to do something resembling an autopsy showed that they'd been shot. And if you Google biological bullets, you'll find this extraordinary patent that was taken out by a guy called Darrell Rubin for a biological bullet which contains material inside the bullet that has an effect other than just the kinetic damage of the bullet hitting the body. That is to say, it could release a nerve agent like Novichok. Incidentally, if you Google Novichok and Penn University, you'll find Northwestern University was awarded a Asian project where the elements to be detoxified include Novichok.
Right, I forgot about that.
So there we are. I'm looking now at an article, Global Swoop on News Group Pedophiles, dated 8th November 2001, just after. And I think this is where it mentions Serco.
We're losing you there, David. Sorry, give me those search terms again and I'll bring it up.
Global Swoop on News Group Pedophiles, spelt the English way, which is P-A-E-D-O-P-H-I-L-E-S. Right? And I read one sentence from that. A spokesman from Thus, Demon's present parent company, says that investigators were not given access to the server logs that record Demon user activities. But this system was developed in conjunction with the UK company Serco. Right?
Thank you
so
for pointing us to that.
investigators say they've discovered 10,000 suspect postings to over 30 different news groups and identified 60,000 new images. They plan to use face recognition software to identify victims in different images to help trace them. This software has been developed in conjunction with UK company Serco, although no technical details have been released. So Serco is operating, I allege, a pedophile entrapment and extortion and blackmail racket from inside key government departments, right, including the United States National Visa Center, the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
There it is, right there.
The United States Defense Ammunition Center. Yeah, sorry, have you found it?
Yeah. Well
there
done.
it is.
Yeah, thank you. New Scientist
so
from 2001.
Let's go back to the raid, the 20th of August 1999 raid on Starnet Communications at 425 Carroll Street, which had offices, the first three, ground 1, 2, and offices, floors at 425 Carroll Street, below H.A. Simons, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of AMEC. Now, AMEC...
It's in Ontario. Where is that, Carroll Street?
Carroll Street in Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah.
Right. So what I'm alleging is that people like David Swigart were given the job of developing or identifying the vulnerabilities for a company such as Starnet Communications that was trading in child and hardcore pornography and online gaming. And I think that's a particular type of online gaming involving spot fixing the death of an individual and taking bets on how long they die. So let's say you take one of these poor women out to the pig farm, put them in front of an audience of up to 1,700 people that would have been in many cases flown in because there's very little parking out at the pig farm. So I believe these people were flown into hotels in Vancouver and bused to the pig farm to attend the raves. There would be up to 1,700 to 2,000 people watching the poor woman being potentially, let's say, shot with a biological bullet, where they would bet on the length of time it would take her to die. I mean, it's beyond depraved.
Well, I think we should also mention, David, that this is not just something that you're making up. This is not mere fantasy. You are basing this on an explanation that fits the evidence of the crime, and that is that there were murder victims at the pig farm who had bullet wounds and bullets in them, although that did not match the MO of Mr. Pickford, right?
Picton, yeah, exactly. He was supposed to have strangled his victims. The Crown tried to introduce that there had to be others at the crime scene because that wasn't his MO. He was accused basically of strangling them. maybe injecting them with antifreeze. I mean, this guy is a real sicko, but he's a retard, right? He's got a double life sentence for second-degree murder because the jury said...
I think we're not supposed to use the word retard.
Oh, sorry. All right.
If he is actually mentally retarded, we can discuss that, but I think it's considered impolite.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, I don't want to be rude. So in order to run a crime on that scale, from 1996 to August 1999, you need some extremely sophisticated encrypted communications networks to get your product out and into the marketplace. The logical place for it to go to, I believe, is a pay-per-view system in a significant number of upmarket hotels where you can actually entrap people to bet on this kind of garbage and record their betting and effectively make them a party to the distribution of child and hardcore pornography, right? So wouldn't that be an interesting way of getting the people who patronize 4-star and 5-star hotels, such as Barack Hussein Obama and his wife Michelle?
Right? Well, anyone.
And I'm not saying they are guilty of anything other than that they, and Swigert should know this, they're vulnerable to being entrapped in a hotel room where they wittingly or unwittingly sign into this garbage. They watch it, they pay for it on their credit cards. And now Serco is able to track through Christine Mass's National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database all the kind of people that need to be contacted after a crime like 911 and told to shut up or else. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, you know, David, I think I should remind everyone that we're just about 10 minutes away from wrapping up this preview broadcast, and we'll carry on the conversation on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource-the-truth. As you said, it is very important that we expand what we're doing and spread this word. And we're very grateful to our generous Patreon sponsors and would suggest that perhaps if people share these preview videos with friends and family members who might find this information interesting, that would be very helpful. And of course, you know, we're always looking for countermanding evidence, anything that we say that might be incorrect. We're open to hearing alternative evidence, but of course, people who rudely approach me or you and jump to conclusions, there is a very unappealing individual in Poland who initially contacted me, and then, you know, he called me up and said, "David is lying to you." And that right away is something that he really can't prove. He can't even necessarily represent evidence to support that claim, even if he has evidence that something you've said is incorrect. So it immediately put me on a sort of, I didn't trust him very much because I felt he was trying to malign you, and I think he continues to try to do that. Anyone who wants to participate in a civilized manner and not hurl insults and be rude and off-putting, we welcome. But there are all these questions, David. I don't understand why a university would hire a known terrorist. I don't understand why a PhD would involve herself in a potential charity fraud and refuse to examine any evidence presented to her that the charity is not registered with the New York State Bureau of Charities. I also don't understand why the highly questionable lawyer representing that charity wouldn't first issue me a cease and desist, a demand for a public retraction, along with evidence refuting what I've said, like perhaps something that would show I'm incorrect. If there is a registration with the New York State Bureau of Charities, I would expect to see that before an $18 million lawsuit, which by most professional legal experts' accounts is a total fraud. The participants in the lawsuit have now been accused of a fraud on the court, and if the findings go that way, there is possibly serious legal jeopardy for everyone involved in that fraud. So there's a proper way to go about alerting people of inaccuracies in reporting, and there are a lot of people who share information with us, David, that changes the direction we go in, right?
Yeah, and we have this gift, I think, that we share with our supporters, subscribers, is the gift of discovery. We can do things on the fly. For example, you know, you couldn't find the reference to Serco,
Yeah.
Demon, etc., etc. Well, there it is, just after 911,
Yeah.
where Bill Ayers is celebrating his failure to do less on 911 with a letter or an article in the New York Times. So on 911, I guess he captured or recaptured some ground. Now, what I believe that we can do...
David, sorry, I've just thought of something, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is talking about a global swoop on news groups. Now, news groups are a precursor to social media, and there's been a lot of conversation lately because, you know, the lawyer that's representing this allegedly fraudulent charity is also representing Congressman Devin Nunes in a lawsuit that has been widely derided by legal experts across the political spectrum. And one of the key elements at the center of that lawsuit is this Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which was originally written to address postings in, I believe, prodigy news groups. And it's still being applied to social media today, although many people have said that the complexity and the pervasive nature of social media makes this CDA 230 legislation sort of obsolete. And there have been a lot of people wondering why Devin Nunes wouldn't introduce new, modernized legislation rather than rolling out a lawsuit that in many ways represents lawsuits that have already failed and could in fact put more legitimate lawsuits at jeopardy. So that's interesting that this article about the global swoop on newsgroup pedophiles seems to cross over into some of these areas.
And I think we should think back to who's on the network of the Northwestern IT partnerships, which is a vast network primarily focused on benefits, I believe, to the teachers community, let's say the evil teachers community, because the only one outfit that I think is a notorious haven for pedophiles, unfortunately, and a media outlet is the BBC. Because on 911, what's his name was still alive, Jimmy Savile, probably 4 decades of pedophile, I believe, entrapment and blackmail, including up into the highest reaches of the government in the United Kingdom. And of course, the guests of the BBC who might come down to London to be interviewed. I mean, obviously, it's a prestigious way of getting your name and your character and personality across. But after hours, once you've had your interview with the BBC, maybe you're sent or taken to a hotel where Jimmy Savile provides the services of a child, and you go home and you've got your name out in lights, etc., etc. But unfortunately, you're now being compromised because in the hotel there's a camera that's recording you doing something disgusting with an underage child, right, a boy or girl. So Jimmy Savile, I believe, I don't know if that's a familiar term, I believe he was a necrophiliac as well. So yeah, he slept with corpses, a pretty disgusting creature. But 40 years within the BBC, and there's a woman who is, I think, the presenter of Crime Watch, which is a very famous show in the UK, BBC show, and her name was Jill Dando, and I believe she was trying to blow the whistle of a pedophile ring within the BBC, wow, which is a partner of Northwestern IT partnerships, right? And so she's going home, she gets to her front door, someone walks up behind her and pumps a bullet into her head, which is quite a special bullet. The gun, I think, was modified so it didn't make too much noise. And the fellow walks away, and that's a cold case. Well, I think you and I are almost uniquely qualified to solve cold cases of that type, because I think she was blowing the whistle on the kind of organization that could potentially have been set up through a split tunneling technology for Starnet Communications, which was trading in online child and hardcore pornography, pay-per-view, and online gaming that I believe would allow, for example, you to sit in a 4-star hotel, either in Vancouver or somewhere else in the world, and bet on how long it would take for a woman shot with a biological bullet to die in great agony or through an anticoagulant bullet, right? That means she bled to death. Wow. And maybe they strap a pulse meter on her wrist to find out when her vital signs die. So you have potentially a global network of people who patronize 4-star and 5-star hotels. And then there's another guy called, what's his name? Robert Diduca, Robertdiduca, Diduca, who I think spent 25 years in the hotel trade, and he was arrested for belonging to a pedophile news group. And of course, the implication there is, or potential for there is, that he's actually got his agents inside these 4-star and 5-star hotels. Like the Marriott Hotel is now the biggest hotel chain in the world with 1 million rooms. Marriott bought Starwood from ITT.
Now, let me just address this real quickly, David, because we're almost out of time before we go over to Patreon. But that's amazing. I never heard of this woman, Jill Dando, but that sounds like a murder that you and I should look into for sure. That's astounding. And I just found this article from the other day. They're actually making a documentary. This is from just a few days ago. It's the 20th anniversary of her death. And again, I've never heard of this. Possibly if more people knew about it and we had, you know, more of a crowdsource investigation going on, maybe we'd learn something about it. But let's touch on this Sheraton Hotel general manager who was arrested in 2010 on child porn charges. Now, Sheraton has recently merged with Marriott, and you know there are moronic people around the internet who have, you know, incorrectly asserted that you make claims without any evidence. And of course, when you say that, is it possible that these tools and networks and software and hardware utilities could be used to send child pornography over high-speed networks in places like hotels? Well, doesn't a news article like this suggest that there is at least some validity to a question like that?
Yeah, totally. And that schematic, you don't have it in today's collage, but it's very interesting. That split tunnel schematic, and it's rather small print, but the part that is going around the virtual private network, and in the case of the virtual private network of the Federal Bridge, you've got Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Boeing, and EADS, which is the Airbus supplier. I think they're sitting ducks for the kind of entrapment and extortion activities for which Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers should be justly famous.
Absolutely.
They're shakedown specialists. And incidentally, did you know that Michelle Obama, I think, was given an opportunity to resign from her law practice or lose her license in 1993 or face an investigation into insurance fraud? Well, we've been talking about catastrophe bond frauds for some time now. I would think that her husband, Barack Hussein Obama, who in 1984 was working with BIC, which ostensibly is a Business International Corporation. I think it's British Invisibles Corporation in New York, and he specialized in leverage leases and currency swaps.
Yeah,
well, on
David, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're going to need to wrap it up very, very soon. We've got just about 1 minute, and we've got to get over to patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource-the-truth. I think a lot of people want to hear some of your insights about the details of today's discussion that pertain to the New Zealand shooting. Of course, you've been talking about Starnet communications and online gaming. I think many people would agree that the nature of the video that Brendan Tarrant made is extremely reminiscent of online gaming, that first-person shooter type style that really was a type of imagery that did not exist until video games and first-person shooter games. So let's wrap it up here if that's all right, and we can carry on in just 11 minutes on patreon.com/crowdsource-the-truth and patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards.
And can I just say, at Twitter at CSI Hawkins, because I'm just a practitioner of Twitterism.
Yes, I apologize for not having that at the ready. I will in the future, David. I hope people will join us, and I'll see you there in just 10 minutes.
Look forward to it, Jason. Bye now.